The scream tore from Marcus Chen's throat before he could stop it. No, that's Mom. His hand slammed against the tinted window of the luxury sedan as his heart hammered against his ribs. Through the dusty streets of Riverside District, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A frail 70-year-old woman slumped in a battered wheelbarrow, her silver hair matted, her clothes filthy. Pushing her was a young man, no more than 20, wearing a faded shirt and torn sneakers. "Stop the car," Marcus shouted. The driver hit the brakes. Marcus didn't wait. He threw open the door and ran, his expensive shoes kicking up dust as he sprinted toward the impossible sight before him. The woman he'd been searching for 6 agonizing days. The woman the police said had vanished without a trace. His mother. If you're enjoying this story, please like, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe for more inspiring tales. Hit that notification bell so you never miss. Try to watch the video finish so that you will never miss next story. Mom, please look at me. Marcus fell to his knees beside the wheelbarrow, his hands trembling as he reached for his mother's shoulders. Tears blurred his vision so quickly he could barely see her face. "Sir," the young man stammered, his hands frozen on the wooden handles. Do you know her?" "Know her?" Marcus's voice cracked. "This is my mother. My mother." The woman, Helen Chen, blinked slowly, her eyes unfocused and distant. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She looked confused, lost, as if she didn't recognize her own son. Marcus turned sharply to the young man. "Where did you find her? How long has she been like this? Tell me everything." The young man swallowed hard, his dark eyes filled with a mixture of fear and compassion. "My name is David, sir. I found her 3 days ago, lying by the roadside. She was too weak to stand. She kept calling for help, but everyone just walked past her." Marcus felt something break inside his chest. His mother, one of the most dignified women he'd ever known, had been abandoned on the street like garbage. "I couldn't leave her there," David continued quietly. "She couldn't remember her name or where she came from. So I took her to my place. I used my wheelbarrow to move her. I fed her what little food I had." Marcus stared at this stranger, this poor young man who had done what dozens of others had refused to do. "You fed her?" David nodded. "Yes, sir. And today, I was taking her to the police station. I thought maybe they could help find her family." Marcus's throat tightened. He looked back at his mother, at her hollow cheeks and trembling hands. 6 days. She'd been missing for 6 days, and this young man, this stranger, had been the only one to show her mercy. "David," Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved her life." Marcus's driver rushed over, his face pale with shock. "Mr. Chen, what do you need?" "Help me lift her," Marcus said. "We're going to the hospital. Now." As Marcus carefully lifted his mother into his arms, her head lolled against his shoulder. She felt so light, so fragile, as if she might break at any moment. "David," Marcus said, turning to the young man. "Get in the car." David's eyes widened. "Sir, I can't. That's too nice of a car for someone like me. You helped my mother when she had nothing, when she was forgotten by everyone else." Marcus's voice was firm but gentle. "I won't leave you here. Please. Get in." David hesitated, looking down at his muddy sneakers and his worn-out wheelbarrow, the only thing he owned in the world. He felt too small, too poor, too invisible for such luxury. But Marcus opened the back door and nodded. "Please." Slowly, David climbed into the leather seat, sitting stiffly, afraid to touch anything. The car smelled clean, expensive, so different from the dusty streets he called home. Marcus held his mother close, whispering urgently, "You're safe now, Mom. You're safe." But even as he spoke, dread coiled in his stomach. Her breathing was shallow. Her skin felt cold. Her pulse was weak and irregular. "Drive fast," Marcus told his driver. "Don't stop for anything." The car roared to life and sped toward Metropolitan General Hospital, weaving through traffic with desperate speed. In the back seat, Marcus kept his eyes on his mother's face, searching for any sign of recognition, any flicker of the woman who had raised him. David sat across from them, his hands clasped tightly together, his heart pounding. He'd pushed heavy loads through the streets of Riverside for years, but he'd never felt weight like this, the weight of a life hanging in the balance. "She's going to be okay," David whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "She has to be." But as the hospital came into view, something changed. Helen's head fell sideways. Her eyes closed completely. Her hand slipped from Marcus's grip as if it had no strength left at all. "Mom. Mom, wake up." Marcus shook her gently, panic flooding his voice. David leaned forward, reaching for her wrist to check her pulse. His face went pale. "Sir," he whispered, his voice breaking. I can't feel her heartbeat." The car screeched to a halt outside the emergency entrance, and Marcus's scream echoed through the night. The emergency room doors flew open as Marcus burst through, carrying his mother in his arms. "Help! Please, somebody help us." Nurses turned immediately. One gasped at the sight of the unconscious woman. Another ran ahead, shouting orders. "This way. Bring her here quickly." David followed close behind, his legs trembling so badly he thought they might give out. He'd never been inside such a large, modern hospital. The bright lights, the sharp smell of antiseptic, the urgent footsteps, it all made his chest tighten with fear. But what scared him most was the look on Marcus's face. Pure terror. Here was a man who could buy anything in the world, yet he couldn't buy the one thing that mattered most: time. "Mom, please open your eyes," Marcus whispered as medical staff took Helen from his arms. "Please don't leave me." They placed her on a gurney and rushed her toward the emergency bay. Marcus tried to follow, but a doctor stopped him with a firm hand. "Sir, please wait here." "No." Marcus grabbed the doctor's coat. "She's my mother. I have to be with her." The doctor looked at him with kindness, but his voice remained firm. "We'll do everything we can, but you need to let us work. You must stay outside." Marcus froze. His chest rose and fell rapidly. Every instinct screamed at him to push through those doors, to stay by his mother's side. But he couldn't. He had no choice. Slowly, he stepped back. The doors swung shut. Above them, a red light flickered on. Emergency in progress. David stood nearby, breathless and overwhelmed. He'd never seen someone fight so desperately for a parent. His own parents had disappeared years ago, taken from him before he'd ever had the chance to save them. Marcus leaned against the wall, covering his face with both hands. His shoulders shook silently as tears soaked into his palms. David moved closer, unsure what to say. "Sir, she's strong. She survived 3 days on the streets without food or water. She'll fight." Marcus looked up, his eyes red and swollen. "You helped her when everyone else walked past. You didn't know who she was. You didn't know she had a family. You didn't know she had a son who'd been searching everywhere for her." His voice broke. "Yet you helped anyway." David lowered his gaze. "It was the right thing to do." "The world doesn't do the right thing anymore," Marcus whispered. Silence filled the corridor. David's stomach growled quietly. He hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. But he didn't move. He couldn't leave. Not while Helen was fighting for her life. After 30 agonizing minutes, a nurse emerged from the emergency room, her expression tense. "Sir," she called out. Marcus rushed forward. "Yes. How is she?" "The doctors are still working," the nurse said carefully. "But she's not responding yet." David's heart sank. Marcus's face went pale. "Can I see her?" Marcus begged. "Not yet, sir. I'm sorry." Marcus nodded slowly, his lips trembling. He looked like he might collapse. David took a deep breath, then did something he'd never done before. He reached out and gently placed his hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Sir, don't give up hope." Marcus turned, surprised by the gesture. But somehow, David's presence gave him strength. Even though David looked poor, tired and hungry, there was something genuine in his voice. Something pure. Hours crawled by. The hospital grew quieter as night settled over the city. David dozed off on a bench, his head resting against the cold wall, his fingers still clutching the small key to his wheelbarrow, the only possession he owned. Marcus remained awake, pacing the hallway, praying under his breath, whispering his mother's name again and again. Then finally, at 10:47 p.m., the red emergency light turned off. Marcus froze mid-step. The doors opened. A doctor walked out, exhaustion etched into his face. "Sir," he said softly. "She's stable for now." Marcus almost fell to his knees. Relief washed over him like a tidal wave. "Can I see her?" The doctor nodded. They led Marcus and David into the recovery room. The gentle beeping of machines filled the quiet space. Helen lay in the hospital bed, an oxygen tube beneath her nose, her eyes closed, but her breathing steady. Marcus walked to her side and took her hand. "Mom," he whispered. "I'm here." David stood by the doorway, afraid to come any closer. Then Helen's fingers twitched. Marcus gasped. "Mom." Slowly, very slowly, her eyes opened. She blinked weakly, her gaze moving from the ceiling to the window, then landing on Marcus. Her lips parted. "My son." Marcus couldn't hold back any longer. Tears streamed down his face as he gently embraced his mother, careful not to disturb the tubes and wires connected to her. "Oh, Mom," he whispered. "You scared me so much." Helen's frail hand reached up and touched his cheek, her fingers trembling. "You found me." "I looked everywhere," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "Every street, every hospital, every shelter. I thought I'd lost you forever." Helen's eyes filled with tears. Then slowly, she turned her head and noticed David standing near the doorway. For a moment, she stared at him as if trying to remember. Then recognition softened her features. "You," she whispered. "You helped me." David swallowed hard, emotion tightening his throat. "Yes, ma'am. I couldn't leave you on the road." Helen's shaky hand reached toward him. David stepped closer and gently held it. "Thank you, my child," she said weakly. "You gave me a second chance." Those words hit David like a punch to the chest. No one had called him my child in years. Not since his parents vanished. Not since he became invisible to the world. Marcus watched silently, his heart swelling with gratitude. This poor young man, this stranger, had done what seemed impossible. He'd shown compassion when the world had shown cruelty. For the first time in days, the hospital room felt warm, safe, whole. But peace never lasts long. Suddenly, the heart monitor beeped sharply. Helen gasped, her eyes rolling back. Her hands went limp. "Mom!" Marcus screamed. Nurses rushed into the room. The doctor pushed past Marcus, shouting orders. "Move back. She's crashing again." David froze in horror as alarms filled the space. The sound of the monitor screaming was unbearable. "Mama, please stay with me." Marcus cried, reaching for her, but a nurse gently held him back. "Start CPR," the doctor shouted. "Get the crash cart. Check her vitals." The room exploded into chaos. Benjamin stood rooted to the spot, his chest heaving, his legs shaking. He felt like the ground was collapsing beneath him. He'd seen people faint before. He'd seen people collapse from hunger. But this was different. This was life slipping away right in front of him. "Please, God," David whispered. "Not again. Please." The doctors worked frantically, pressing on Helen's chest, adjusting her oxygen, calling her name. Marcus sobbed into his hands, trembling uncontrollably. Then, beep, beep. Her heartbeat returned. Slow, but steady. Marcus collapsed against the wall, crying in relief. David let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. One of the nurses spoke gently. "She's back. But she's still very weak." They carefully moved Helen to a different area of the room for closer monitoring, attaching new sensors and adjusting her medications. Marcus sat beside her bed, holding her hand as if letting go would make her disappear again. David remained near the doorway, his hands pressed tightly together, his eyes never leaving Helen. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor approached Marcus. "Sir," he said quietly, "your mother needs rest. She's had a major shock. Her body is exhausted. She may wake again soon, but you must prepare yourself. At her age, anything can happen." Marcus looked down, fresh tears gathering in his eyes. "I can't lose her." The doctor placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "We're doing everything we can." When the doctor left, silence settled over the room. Only the gentle rhythm of the heart monitor filled the air. Marcus wiped his face and turned to David. "You haven't said much. Are you okay?" David blinked. "I'm fine, sir." "You look scared." David stared at Helen's sleeping form. I don't want her to die. She was kind to me. She thanked me." His voice dropped to a whisper. "No one ever thanks me. Not for anything." Marcus studied the young man carefully. He noticed David's hands, rough and calloused from pushing heavy loads. His shirt was torn at the side. His sneakers had holes in them. Even now, David seemed uncomfortable, as if he didn't belong in such a clean, expensive place. "Come," Marcus said gently. "Sit down." David hesitated before slowly taking a seat on the edge of a bench. He sat stiffly, careful not to touch anything. After a long silence, Marcus spoke. "How did you end up in Riverside with a wheelbarrow?" David looked down at his scarred hands. "It's a long story, sir." "I want to hear it." David's throat tightened. For the first time in years, he felt safe enough to speak. Maybe it was because Helen had held his hand. Maybe it was because Marcus looked at him like he actually mattered. Or maybe he was just tired of holding everything inside. David took a shaky breath. The words felt heavy in his chest, like stones he'd been carrying for years. "My parents disappeared when I was 16, he said quietly. "One evening, they went to buy supplies for our small shop. They never came home." Marcus's eyes widened. "What happened to them?" "The police looked everywhere," David continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "But they found nothing. No witnesses. No clues. After a week, our landlord evicted me because we couldn't pay rent. I had nowhere to go." "You were completely alone?" Marcus asked softly. David nodded. "Yes, sir. No relatives. No money. No home." He rubbed his hands together slowly, a habit he'd developed whenever the pain became too much to bear. "I was the top student at Riverside Secondary School," he said, a trace of pride flickering in his voice. "My teachers said I could win a scholarship to university. They said I had a bright future in science." Marcus leaned forward, listening intently. "But after my parents vanished, everything stopped," David continued. "I couldn't afford school fees. I couldn't even afford food. So I started carrying loads at the market. Someone gave me an old wheelbarrow. I've been using it to survive ever since." "Do you eat regularly?" Marcus asked, though he already suspected the answer. David smiled weakly. "Sometimes. Some days I don't. But it doesn't matter. I just try to stay alive." Marcus felt his chest constrict. This wasn't just a poor young man. This was a fighter. A survivor. Someone who'd been broken by life but still chose kindness. "Did I do something wrong by bringing your mother here?" David asked suddenly, uncertainty clouding his eyes. "Wrong." Marcus's voice cracked. "You saved her. Without you, she would have died on that road. No one would have stopped." No one would have cared. David blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. No one had ever told him he'd saved anything. Not a person. Not even a moment. He'd felt worthless for so long. I won't forget what you did, Marcus said firmly. Ever. David pressed his lips together, struggling not to break down completely. His chest felt warm, almost painful. No one had spoken to him like this. Not since his parents were taken. Not since his life fell apart. But their moment of peace was shattered. A nurse entered to check the machines monitoring Helen. Her brow furrowed as she examined one of the readouts. What's wrong? Marcus asked immediately, jumping to his feet. The nurse stared at the screen. Her oxygen levels are dropping. Is she in danger? David asked, moving closer. The nurse didn't answer directly. I need to get the doctor. She hurried out of the room. Marcus's heart began racing again. David moved to the bedside. Mom, David whispered. Please stay with us. Marcus clenched his fists. Not again. Please, not again. The corridor outside grew eerily quiet. The doctor was taking too long. Then Helen's breathing changed. It became shallow, fast, strained. Her fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered. Mom. Marcus rushed to her side. David grabbed her hand. The heart monitor began beeping louder, faster, more erratic. Helen's chest rose sharply, then dropped, then rose again, but weakly this time. No, 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 the nurse said as she ran back in. She's going into respiratory distress. Marcus grabbed David's arm. David held Helen's hand tighter. The doctor burst through the door at full speed. Everyone move back, he shouted. But it was too late. Helen's body jerked once, then went completely still. The monitor flatlined, and the room filled with that terrible, continuous beep. Mama! Marcus screamed. David's eyes went wide with horror. Code blue! The nurse shouted. Get the crash cart. The room erupted into controlled chaos. Medical staff moved with practiced urgency. Marcus staggered backward, his legs barely supporting him. David stood frozen, his heart hammering in his chest. He'd promised her she'd be okay. He'd promised. The doctor began chest compressions. Helen, stay with us. Come on, breathe. Nothing. He tried again. Still nothing. The monitor's alarm screamed relentlessly. Marcus dropped to his knees, hands covering his head. Not like this, he sobbed. Please, Mom. Not like this. David's vision blurred with tears. I should have brought her earlier, he whispered. I should have done more. You did everything, the doctor said firmly, never stopping compressions. Charge the defibrillator. A nurse rushed over with the paddles. Stand clear. Everyone stepped back. The high-pitched whine of the charging unit filled the room. Then, thump. Helen's body jolted. The monitor flashed. Nothing. Again. Clear. Another shock. Still nothing. Marcus couldn't watch. He pressed his forehead to the cold floor, tears streaming down his face. David couldn't take it anymore. While medical staff prepared for another attempt, he stepped forward, ignoring the nurse trying to pull him back. He placed his hand gently on Helen's foot, the only part of her body not covered by wires and equipment. Mom, he said, his voice steady despite the tears streaming down his face. You fought for 3 days on the street. You survived hunger. You survived cold. You survived being forgotten. The room seemed to hold its breath. Please don't stop now, David continued. I still need you. Your son still needs you. Please come back. The doctor glanced at him, then nodded to the nurse. Let him speak. David squeezed his eyes shut. You called me my child. No one has said those words to me in years. Please come back. I'm not ready to say goodbye. Not like this. One more charge, the doctor said quietly. Clear. The machine whined. Thump. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a small twitch. Barely noticeable. Wait, the doctor said. Everyone quiet. The flatline continued for what felt like an eternity. Then, beep. The monitor flickered back to life. Weak. Slow. But alive. She's back, the nurse exclaimed. Marcus screamed in relief, scrambling to his feet and rushing to the bedside. David staggered backward, covering his mouth as sobs racked his body. The doctor exhaled deeply. She's holding on. But she needs complete rest. No stress. No excitement. Marcus grabbed David and pulled him into a fierce embrace. You helped bring her back, he whispered. You saved her twice. David shook his head in disbelief. No one had ever hugged him like this. No one had ever told him he mattered. The hours that followed were tense but stable. Helen remained unconscious, but her vital signs gradually improved. Marcus refused to leave her side. David sat in a corner, too afraid to sleep, too worried to leave. By morning, Helen was breathing more steadily. Around noon, the doctor entered with better news. She's stable, he announced. Her body is responding to treatment. Can she wake up? Marcus asked, hope creeping into his voice. Possibly today, the doctor replied. Her mind needs time to recover, but the signs are positive. David smiled for the first time since entering the hospital. They moved Helen to a recovery room. As nurses adjusted her bed, something miraculous happened. Her fingers moved. Her eyes fluttered. Mom. Marcus leaned forward. Can you hear me? She blinked slowly. Then she saw him. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. Son, she whispered. Marcus's heart nearly burst with joy. He gently took her hand, tears of relief streaming down his face. Helen's eyes moved slowly toward David. She stared at him, trying to place his face. He stepped forward nervously. Hello, ma'am. It's me. David. Recognition flickered in her eyes. You. The young man who helped me. He nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. She lifted her hand weakly. He held it gently. Bless you, she whispered. God bless you, my child. A tear slid down David's cheek. Thank you, ma'am. After some time, Marcus took David outside to let his mother rest. The hallway was quiet. David rubbed his hands together nervously, unsure what would happen next. He had no family waiting for him. No home. No money. Not even a real place to sleep. Marcus looked at the young man with deep emotion. You saved my mother's life, he said. Twice. David lowered his gaze. I only did what anyone should do. Marcus shook his head. No. You did what most people refuse to do. Silence hung between them. Tell me about your life, Marcus said gently. I want to understand everything. So David told him. Everything. He told him about the night his parents disappeared. About sleeping in the market for years. About pushing heavy loads just to eat once a day. About how every dream he once had died slowly. He spoke softly, but every word cut Marcus like a knife. You said you were the best student in your school? Marcus asked. Yes, sir. Science came easily to me. I wanted to be a doctor one day. A doctor? Yes. But dreams are expensive. Marcus stared at him, speechless. This young man, who looked broken and forgotten, had a brilliant mind hidden beneath the dust of poverty. Marcus took a deep breath. David, he said carefully. You saved my mother when you had nothing. You cared for her like she was your own. You didn't ask for a reward. David's eyes filled with confusion. So now, Marcus said gently, it's our turn. David blinked. Sir. I will sponsor your education, Marcus said firmly. Every part of it. David froze. His mind went blank. His mouth fell open. I don't understand, he whispered. You deserve a chance, Marcus said, his voice steady and sure. You gave my mother a second chance at life. Now let us give you one too. David shook his head, unable to process what he was hearing. Sir, I'm just a wheelbarrow boy. Not anymore, Marcus said firmly. Not from today. David covered his face as tears fell freely. No one had ever chosen him. No one had ever believed in him. No one had ever offered him a future. Behind them, a soft voice spoke. Marcus. They turned. Helen stood at the doorway, supported by a nurse. Her eyes were filled with tears, but they shone with determination. Mom, you should be resting, Marcus said, rushing to her side. I heard everything, Helen said weakly. And I agree with you completely. She looked at David with such warmth that he felt his knees go weak. This young man deserves more than just a chance, Helen continued. He deserves a life, the same way he saved mine. David stared at her, trembling. Helen opened her arms. My child, she said softly. Come here. David walked toward her slowly, then felt her warm, shaking embrace. For the first time in years, since his parents vanished, he felt truly loved. He buried his face in her shoulder and wept. Marcus stood beside them, his own eyes wet with tears. This was what family felt like. Not blood, but choice, kindness, love. Over the following weeks, Marcus kept his promise. He enrolled David in an accelerated preparatory program to help him catch up on years of missed education. David studied with an intensity that amazed his tutors. He's exceptional, one professor told Marcus. I've never seen someone absorb information this quickly. Within 6 months, David passed his entrance exams with the highest scores in the region. He was accepted into the prestigious College of Medicine at Capital University. The day David received his acceptance letter, he sat in Helen's garden, staring at the paper in disbelief. Helen sat beside him, her health fully restored. What are you thinking, my child? I'm thinking about that dusty road in Riverside, David said quietly. About how different my life would be if I hadn't found you that day. Helen took his hand. Or if you had walked past me like everyone else did. I could never do that, David said. I know, Helen smiled. That's why you're going to make an extraordinary doctor. David looked at her. I want to help people the way I wished someone had helped my parents. You will, she promised. You already have. University life was challenging. David worked harder than any other student. While others went to parties, he studied. While others slept, he reviewed his notes. He was driven by something deeper than ambition. He was driven by purpose. He remembered every hungry night sleeping in the market. Every person who had looked through him as if he didn't exist. Every time he'd felt invisible. And he promised himself, no patient would ever feel that way under his care. Marcus and Helen visited him often at university. They brought him food, encouragement, and love. Sometimes Helen would simply sit in his small dorm room, asking about his classes, listening to him talk about anatomy and physiology with such passion that it made her heart swell. You're not just studying to become a doctor, she told him once. You're becoming the person you were always meant to be. By his 3rd year, David's professors were calling him one of the most promising medical students they'd ever taught. His surgical precision was remarkable. His bedside manner was exceptional. His dedication was unmatched. He has a gift, the Dean of Medicine told Marcus during a visit. We've already had several hospitals request him for their residency programs. Marcus smiled with pride. That doesn't surprise me at all. David graduated top of his class 5 years later. The auditorium erupted in applause as his name was called, David Chen, Best Graduating Student, College of Medicine. Marcus and Helen sat in the front row, both crying tears of joy. David walked across the stage in his graduation gown, shaking hands with professors, his medal gleaming on his chest. When he received his certificate, he bowed respectfully. Then he looked directly at Marcus and Helen, and mouthed 2 words. "Thank you." After the ceremony, they took countless photos together, laughing, hugging, celebrating not just a graduation, but a transformation. "You did it," Marcus said, pulling David into an embrace. "I knew you would from the moment you saved my mother." "I couldn't have done it without you both," David replied. Helen cupped his face in her hands. "You saved me first, my child. We only helped you finish your journey." But the journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. David's transition from student to practicing doctor was seamless. He began his medical residency at Metropolitan General Hospital, the same hospital where Helen had fought for her life years earlier. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. "It's like coming full circle," Helen said on his first day, straightening his white coat with maternal pride. David looked at his name tag. Dr. David Chin, resident physician. He still couldn't quite believe it was real. "Nervous?" Marcus asked. "Terrified," David admitted. "What if I'm not good enough?" Helen took his face in her hands. "You've already proven yourself 1,000 times over. Now go and prove it 1,000 times more." The first months were grueling. Long shifts. Emergency cases. Life and death decisions. David barely slept, surviving on coffee and determination. But something remarkable began to happen. Patients started asking for him by name. Families thanked him for his compassion. Senior doctors praised his clinical judgment. Nurses said he had healing hands. "Dr. Chen stayed with my mother all night," one family member told the hospital administrator. Even though his shift ended, he held her hand when she was scared. The administrator shared the feedback with Marcus during one of his visits. "That's David," Marcus said proudly. "He understands suffering because he's lived it." David's reputation grew steadily. He treated every patient, rich or poor, with the same dignity and care. He remembered what it felt like to be invisible, and he made sure no one felt that way in his presence. During his second year of residency, a critical case arrived. An elderly homeless man found unconscious in an alley. Most doctors hesitated, assuming he had no insurance, no family, no one to advocate for him. David stepped forward immediately. "I'll take him." He worked on the man for hours, stabilizing him, treating his infections, ensuring he received proper nutrition. When the man finally woke up, he looked at David with confusion. "Why did you help me?" the man asked. "I have nothing to give you." David pulled up a chair beside the bed. "Because someone once helped my mother when she had nothing. And that changed everything." Stories like this spread through the hospital. David became known not just as a skilled doctor, but as a compassionate one. The kind of doctor patients prayed they'd get when they were most vulnerable. By his 4th year, David had become one of the most respected young doctors at Metropolitan General. Senior surgeons requested him for complex procedures. The chief of surgery took him under his wing. "You have something special," Dr. Williams told him during a particularly difficult operation. "It's not just skill. It's heart." David never forgot where he came from. On weekends, he volunteered at free clinics in Riverside, the same district where he'd once pushed a wheelbarrow to survive. He paid school fees for promising students who couldn't afford them. He treated the homeless without charging a cent. Marcus and Helen watched his journey with overwhelming pride. "Look at what kindness created," Marcus would say, watching David work. "That young man is a miracle," Helen would reply. "And God allowed us to be part of his story." One evening, after a particularly long shift, David sat with Marcus and Helen in their home, the home that had become his home too. "I've been thinking," David said quietly, "about my parents." Helen reached for his hand. "Tell us." "I used to wonder why they were taken from me," David continued. "Why I had to suffer so much. But now, I think I understand." "What do you understand?" Marcus asked gently. If they hadn't disappeared, I wouldn't have been pushing that wheelbarrow, David said. I wouldn't have found Mom on that road. And none of this, he gestured around the room, would have happened. His voice cracked. I would give anything to have them back. But I also know that their loss led me to you. To this family. To this purpose. Helen's eyes filled with tears. Your parents would be so proud of you. I hope so, David whispered. I try to honor them every day by being the person they raised me to be. Marcus stood and placed both hands on David's shoulders. You honor them. You honor us. And you honor every patient whose life you touch. 7 years after that fateful day in Riverside, David achieved what seemed impossible. He became a consultant surgeon at Metropolitan General Hospital at the age of 27, one of the youngest in the hospital's history. His specialty: emergency trauma surgery. Of course, Helen laughed when he told them. You're drawn to saving people in their darkest moments. It's what I know best, David smiled. But destiny had one more twist waiting for them. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when Helen called Marcus at his office, her voice strained with pain. I fell in the bathroom, she said. I hit my head on the sink. Marcus's heart dropped. I'm coming right now. Don't move. He called David immediately. I'm already at the hospital, David said. Bring her to emergency. I'll be waiting. When Marcus arrived with Helen, David was standing at the entrance with a wheelchair. His face was calm, but Marcus could see the worry in his eyes. Let me examine you, Mom, David said gently, helping her into the wheelchair. He conducted a thorough examination, ordered a CT scan, and studied the results with growing concern. 20 minutes later, he called Marcus into a private consultation room. It's serious, David said quietly. She has another blood clot forming in her brain. A significant one. Marcus felt the world tilt. No. Not again. The good news is we caught it early, David continued. But it requires surgery. Soon. You can do it, right? Marcus asked desperately. You're one of the best surgeons here. David hesitated. I am. But Marcus, this is different. This is Mom. I need you to understand the risks. Tell me everything. David took a deep breath. At her age, brain surgery carries serious complications. There's a risk of stroke, bleeding, infection. There's even a risk she might not wake up. Marcus sank into a chair. What are the alternatives? We can try medication to dissolve the clot, David explained. But given its size and location, I don't think that will work. And if it ruptures? He didn't need to finish the sentence. Marcus looked up at him. What would you do if she were your mother? David's eyes glistened. She is my mother. And I would operate. Then do it, Marcus said firmly. You saved her once before. You can do it again. David nodded slowly. I'll assemble the best team. We'll operate tomorrow morning. That night, David couldn't sleep. He paced his apartment, reviewing surgical procedures, studying Helen's scans over and over, planning every possible scenario. His phone buzzed. It was Marcus. Can't sleep either? Marcus asked. No, David admitted. I keep thinking about that day I found her on the road. What if I hadn't stopped? What if I'd walked past like everyone else? But you didn't, Marcus said. You stopped. You helped. And tomorrow, you're going to save her again. What if something goes wrong? Marcus was quiet for a moment. David, when you found my mother, you had nothing. No medical training. No resources. Just compassion and determination. And somehow, you kept her alive until we could get help. He paused. Now you have everything: training, skill, experience, an entire team. You're not that scared young man with a wheelbarrow anymore. You're Dr. David Chen. And there's no one I trust more with my mother's life. David felt tears roll down his cheeks. Thank you for believing in me. Always, Marcus said. Get some rest. Tomorrow, you've got a life to save. The next morning, the surgical team assembled at 6 a.m. David stood at the scrub sink, methodically washing his hands, focusing his mind. Dr. Williams appeared beside him. Big day. The biggest, David replied. I've seen you operate dozens of times, Dr. Williams said. You're ready for this. Trust your training. Trust your instincts. David nodded, taking a deep breath. In the pre-op room, Helen lay calm and peaceful. Marcus sat beside her, holding her hand. When David entered in his surgical scrubs, Helen smiled. My brilliant boy. David knelt beside her bed. How are you feeling, Mom? Grateful, she said softly. When I was lying on that road years ago, I never imagined this would be my life. That I'd have a son like Marcus. And another son like you. Don't talk like you're saying goodbye, David said, his voice tight. I'm not, Helen assured him. I'm just saying thank you. For finding me. For saving me. For becoming family. She touched his cheek. Now go and do what you were born to do. David stood, straightened his shoulders, and walked toward the operating room. Marcus followed him into the hallway. David turned. Bring her back to us. I will, David promised. I will. The surgical suite was cold and bright. Helen was transferred to the operating table. Anesthesia was administered. The team took their positions. David stood over Helen, scalpel in hand, surrounded by monitors, nurses, and assisting surgeons. Dr. Williams stood across from him. Ready when you are, Dr. Chen. David looked down at the woman who had called him my child, when he was forgotten by the world. The woman who had given him a family, a future, a life. Let's begin, he said. And he made the first incision. The surgery began with precise, careful movements. David's hands were steady as he worked through layers of tissue, exposing the area where the blood clot threatened Helen's brain. Suction, he said calmly. A nurse responded immediately. Vitals stable, another nurse reported. Blood pressure 120/80. Heart rate 72. David focused completely on the task before him. Every movement was calculated. Every decision deliberate. He'd performed dozens of surgeries, but never had the stakes felt this high. This was his mother on the table. Clot is visible, Dr. Williams observed. Larger than the scans suggested. David felt a flutter of concern but pushed it aside. We proceed carefully. No rushing. Time seemed to slow down in the operating room. What felt like minutes were actually hours. David worked meticulously, removing the dangerous clot piece by piece, ensuring no damage to surrounding brain tissue. You're doing beautifully, Dr. Williams said quietly. Textbook precision. Outside the operating room, Marcus sat in the waiting area, his leg bouncing anxiously. He'd been there for 3 hours. Every minute felt like an eternity. A nurse approached. Mr. Chen, would you like some coffee? No, thank you, Marcus said. How much longer? Brain surgery can take 4 to 6 hours, she said gently. Dr. Chen is one of our best. Your mother is in excellent hands. Marcus nodded, but his heart continued to race. Inside the OR, David reached the critical moment. I'm extracting the main portion of the clot now. Everyone stay focused. The room fell silent except for the beeping of monitors. David used microsurgical instruments to carefully remove the clot, working with millimeter precision. One wrong move could cause catastrophic bleeding. Almost there, he whispered to himself. Then, suddenly, BP dropping, a nurse called out. 100/60. David's heart skipped, but his hands remained steady. Increase fluids. Give me a status on heart rate. Heart rate increasing to 95, another nurse responded. Stay with me, Mom, David whispered under his breath. Stay with me. He adjusted his approach, moving even more carefully. Dr. Williams watched intently, ready to assist if needed. BP stabilizing, the nurse reported. 110/70. David exhaled slowly. Good. Continuing extraction. 30 minutes later, he removed the final piece of the clot. Clot fully extracted, David announced. Checking for bleeds. He carefully examined the surgical site, ensuring there was no additional bleeding or damage. Everything looked clean. Beginning closure, he said. The team worked together to close the surgical site, layer by layer. David's movements were smooth and practiced. Surgery complete, David finally said. Total time, 4 hours, 43 minutes. The team relaxed slightly. Nurse began preparing Helen for recovery. Excellent work, Dr. Chen, Dr. Williams said, clapping him on the shoulder. That was exceptional. David pulled off his surgical mask, suddenly feeling the weight of exhaustion. But more than that, he felt overwhelming relief. He'd done it. He stepped out of the operating room, still in his scrubs, and found Marcus pacing the hallway. Marcus spun around. David. David smiled, exhausted but triumphant. The surgery was successful. We removed the clot completely. No complications. Marcus nearly collapsed with relief. She's okay. She's in recovery now, David said. She'll be unconscious for several hours while the anesthesia wears off. But her vitals are strong. The surgery went as well as we could have hoped. Marcus grabbed David and pulled him into a fierce hug. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. She's strong, David said. She fought hard. Several hours later, Helen began to wake. David and Marcus were both at her bedside when her eyes slowly opened. Mom, Marcus said softly. Can you hear me? Helen blinked slowly, her eyes unfocused at first. Then she saw Marcus. Then David. My boys, she whispered, her voice weak but clear. David felt tears spring to his eyes. How do you feel? Tired, Helen said with a small smile. But alive. You're going to make a full recovery, David said, checking her responses. Can you squeeze my hand? Helen squeezed. First his hand, then Marcus's. Perfect, David said, relief flooding through him. Everything looks good. Helen looked at David with such profound love and gratitude. You saved me again, didn't you? David shook his head. You saved yourself, Mom. You're a fighter. We're a family of fighters, she whispered. Marcus laughed through his tears. That we are. The following weeks brought steady recovery. Helen regained her strength day by day. David monitored her progress personally, visiting multiple times each day even when he wasn't on shift. You're hovering, Helen teased during one visit. Doctor's orders, David replied with a grin. My orders specifically. I'm fine, Helen insisted. Better than fine. I'm here. Alive. With both my sons. She looked between Marcus and David. Do you know what the greatest gift in my life has been? What? They asked together. That dusty road in Riverside, Helen said. That's where this family was born. 2 years later, David stood in his office at Metropolitan General Hospital, now as Chief of Emergency Surgery, the youngest person to ever hold the position. On his wall hung 3 framed photographs. The first, a faded image of him as a teenager, standing with his parents before they disappeared. The second, the day he graduated from medical school, standing between Marcus and Helen. The third, a candid shot someone had taken of him in his surgical scrubs, checking on a homeless patient, a moment that captured everything he stood for. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Come in, he called. A young nurse entered nervously. Dr. Chen, there's a patient in the emergency room. Elderly man. Found unconscious in Riverside District. No identification. No family that we know of. David grabbed his stethoscope. "I'll be right there." As he walked through the hospital corridors, he thought about how far he'd come. These same hallways where he'd once sat terrified, watching doctors fight to save Helen, were now his workplace. His home. In the emergency room, he found an elderly man on a gurney, weak and disoriented, his clothes dirty and worn. David approached gently. "Sir, my name is Dr. Chen. You're safe now. Can you tell me your name?" The man's eyes fluttered open. I don't remember. I don't know where I am." David felt a familiar ache in his chest. He'd been there. He'd seen someone in this exact situation years ago. "That's okay," David said softly. "We're going to take care of you. First, let's make sure you're healthy." He spent the next hour personally examining the man, ordering tests, ensuring he received food and water. Other doctors watched, moved by his compassion. Most consultants wouldn't spend this much time on an unidentified patient, one resident whispered to another. "Dr. Chen isn't most consultants," the other replied. Later that evening, David returned home to Marcus and Helen's house, though it had long since become his house too. They'd insisted he move in permanently years ago, and he'd eventually agreed. He found them in the garden, Helen tending her flowers while Marcus read the newspaper. "How was your day, darling?" Helen asked, looking up with a smile. "Busy," David said, sitting beside them. "But good. I treated a man today who reminded me of someone." "Who?" Marcus asked. "You, Mom," David said, looking at Helen. "Lost. Alone. Forgotten by everyone except someone who decided to stop and help." Helen set down her gardening tools and took David's hand. "What did you do?" "I helped him," David said simply. "We're trying to locate his family. In the meantime, he has a warm bed, food, and medical care." "That's my boy," Helen said proudly. Marcus folded his newspaper. "You know, David, I've been thinking about that day. The day I found you pushing Mom in that wheelbarrow." "I think about it too," David admitted. "Every single day. I used to wonder why things happened the way they did," Marcus continued. "Why Mom got lost. Why she ended up on that specific road. Why you, of all people, were the one pushing a wheelbarrow past that exact spot." "And?" David asked. "Now I know," Marcus said. "It wasn't chance. It was purpose. We were meant to find each other. To become family." Helen squeezed David's hand. "You gave me life twice. But you gave us so much more than that. You gave us purpose. You reminded us what matters." David felt his throat tighten with emotion. "You gave me everything. A family. An education. A future. I was invisible before you." "You were never invisible," Helen said firmly. "You just needed someone to truly see you. And thank God we did." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "I have something to tell you both," David said eventually. They looked at him with curiosity. "The hospital board approached me today," David continued. "They want to establish a new program, free medical care for the homeless and unidentified patients. They're calling it the Second Chance Initiative." "That's wonderful," Marcus said. "They want me to lead it," David added. "And they're asking for a significant donation to fund it." Marcus smiled knowingly. "How much do they need?" "That's the thing," David said. "I already agreed to fund half of it myself, from my salary and savings over the years." Helen's eyes widened. "David, that's incredibly generous." "It's necessary," David said. "I was that person once. Invisible. Forgotten. If someone like me had found me back then." His voice trailed off. Marcus stood and placed a hand on David's shoulder. "I'll fund the other half. And we'll make sure this program reaches every person who needs it." "Thank you," David said, his voice thick with gratitude. "Thank you," Marcus replied. for showing us what true compassion looks like. Months later, the Second Chance Initiative launched with great success. Homeless patients received comprehensive medical care. Unidentified individuals were treated with dignity and respect while social workers helped locate their families. The program gained national attention. News outlets featured David's story, from wheelbarrow pusher to celebrated surgeon. But David never sought the spotlight. He simply continued his work, treating every patient as if they were family. One afternoon, David received an unexpected call. "Dr. Chen, there's someone here to see you," his assistant said. "He says it's urgent." David walked to the waiting area and stopped in his tracks. Standing there was an elderly man, the same man he'd treated months earlier. But he looked completely different. Clean, healthy, well-dressed. "Dr. Chen," the man said, his eyes filling with tears. "I don't know if you remember me." "Of course I remember," David said, approaching him. "How are you?" I'm whole again," the man said. "Because of you, they found my family. My daughter had been searching for me for 2 years after I wandered away from a care facility." He grabbed David's hands. "You didn't give up on me. You treated me like I mattered. And you saved my life." David smiled. "I'm glad you found your way home." "I came to thank you," the man said. "And to ask something. My daughter and we want to donate to your program. To help others like me." David felt his chest swell with emotion. That would be incredible. The man pulled out an envelope. "It's not as much as we wish we could give. But it's something." David opened it and gasped. It was a check for $50,000. "This is too generous," David protested. "It's not enough," the man replied. "You gave me back my family, my life. What's money compared to that?" That evening, David shared the news with Marcus and Helen. They celebrated with dinner, laughing and reminiscing about their journey together. "You've built something beautiful," Helen said, looking at David with motherly pride. "Not just a program. A legacy of kindness." "I learned from the best," David replied, looking at them both. Marcus raised his glass. "To family. To second chances. To that dusty road in Riverside that brought us all together." "To family," they echoed, clinking glasses. As the evening wore on, Helen grew quiet. David noticed and moved closer to her. "What are you thinking about, Mom?" She smiled softly. "I'm thinking about how blessed I am. I was lost, forgotten, dying on a road. And a poor young man with nothing stopped to help me. That young man became my son. And that son became a healer who saves countless lives." She touched his face gently. "That's not just a story, David. That's a miracle." "You're the miracle," David said. "You survived. You fought. You gave a stranger a chance when you had every reason not to." "We gave each other chances," Helen replied. "That's what love does." Years continued to pass. David's reputation grew, not just as a brilliant surgeon, but as a compassionate advocate for the forgotten and marginalized. The Second Chance Initiative expanded to 3 other hospitals. Hundreds of lives were saved and transformed. But David never forgot his roots. Every year, on the anniversary of the day he found Helen, he returned to that dusty road in Riverside. He'd park his car, walk along the old path, and remember. He remembered hunger, loneliness, desperation. He remembered pushing that wheelbarrow, carrying people's belongings for spare change. He remembered seeing an old woman lying helpless, and making the decision that changed everything. And he remembered that kindness, true, simple kindness, had the power to transform not just one life but many. On one such anniversary visit, as David stood on that road, a young boy approached him. The boy was thin, wearing worn clothes, pushing a small cart of goods he was trying to sell. "Excuse me, sir," the boy said nervously. "Would you like to buy something?" David looked at him, really looked at him. He saw himself in those eyes. That same hunger. That same hope. What's your name? David asked gently. Emmanuel, sir. Emmanuel, how old are you? 14, sir. Are you in school? The boy looked down. No, sir. I have to work. My family needs money. David reached into his wallet and pulled out his business card. Emmanuel, I want you to take this. Come to this hospital tomorrow and ask for me. Can you do that? The boy looked at the card, confused. Why, sir? David smiled. Because someone once gave me a chance when I had nothing. And now it's my turn to do the same for you. The boy's eyes widened with disbelief and hope. Tomorrow, David repeated. Promise me you'll come. I promise, sir, Emmanuel whispered. As David drove home that evening, he called Marcus and Helen. I met someone today, he said. A young boy who reminded me of myself. What did you do? Helen asked, though she already knew the answer. I gave him a chance, David replied. Just like you gave me. Helen's voice was warm with approval. That's my son. And the cycle of compassion continued. Because that's what love does. It multiplies. It transforms. It saves. One wheelbarrow, one dusty road, one act of kindness at a time. The end. Thank you for following this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs hope today. Comment below with your thoughts and where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. For more inspiring stories that will move your soul, hit that notification bell and check out our playlist. Remember, one act of kindness can change everything. What will yours be? Don't forget to share this video to 1,000 people so that next story will be fantastic and which party of country or state you watching from.